insights into the views and circumstances of others, strength to seek what we believe in, humility to accept the combined decisions of others, patience, good humour at all times, tolerance and courtesy while working in the best interests of our community. Welcome councillors and members of the community for this, the last governing body of this term of Auckland Council. I have received apologies for lateness from Councillor Sayers and apologies for early departure from Councillor Fletcher. Are there any other apologies? Sorry, Councillor Walker? Oh, you're happy to move? Great. So that has been, the motion has moved and seconded, moved by Councillor Wayne Walker, seconded by Councillor Paul Young. All those in... Oh, I'm sorry, but I'll get you to second it anyway, Paul, since you put your hand up. So we'll add that early departure for Councillor Paul Young. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. Declaration of interest. Is there any councillor that has any potential or perceived conflict of interest for any item on the agenda today? Not, we'll move to confirm the minutes. I'll move that way. The minutes of the 22nd of August 2019. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Filipaina. Any matters arising out of the minutes? If not, I'll move the confirmation of the minutes. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. There are no petitions. There are no requests for public input. There is no request for local board input. And there is no indication given to me of any extraordinary business. So we move to item 9 of the agenda. Just before I ask Ollie St Andrews to come up, or I'll ask Ollie to come up anyway to speak to that item, just to let you know a couple of things on the agenda today. Item 12, which is the report of the independent people who oversee our value for money exercise. We will, if we haven't got to that point by 10 o'clock, as soon as whatever item we've finished at 10 o'clock has been completed, I'll ask to move to item 12 so that Miriam Dean has the opportunity to get away. She has other commitments. And of course, today is the day when we receive valedictories from 2 of our longest standing members, and those valedictories, whatever we're up to on the agenda, will commence at 11 o'clock, and we will have the valedictories, and then we will have a light lunch to which the family and friends of the retiring members will be invited. So that will be a big day for Sir John Walker and for Penny Hulse. So we now come to item 9. Ollie, I saw out of the corner of my eye, if you can come to the table. This is the reference to us from the Audit and Risk Committee of the Health, Safety and Wellbeing Update. So just to put the motion on the table, I'll move that motion. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Clow. And Ollie, if we can ask you to speak to the paper, please.
Thank you very much, everyone. Through the chair, just very straightforward. I'll take the report as read. Really, the things that I really want to draw the governing body's attention to is obviously the Starburst 35, which is the performance indicator for safety. At the time of writing this report, we're at 58%, but we've now tipped over into 60. It's quite a meaningful strategic sort of achievement for the organisation. It basically tells you that health and safety and well-being is now more often than not a consideration across all of our departments. So it's starting to become ingrained, which is a fantastic sort of achievement for the organisation. And that's really the major point I wanted to point out in terms of the report. You'll also notice a slightly different way of presenting the data to you, which I probably would like to take some feedback in your own time. But we've basically tried to simplify the dashboard so that you can see exactly what's going on with regards to all the areas of safety. What you will notice is that we've dropped the LTIs, which are the lost time injuries, because that was purely focusing on failure. And what we wanted to look at was a more balanced sort of lead and lag indicator-based dashboard. So I've included that for your information. I'm really happy to take any questions from the governing body. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ollie. So now open to questions. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Oliver. I just wanted to question, when you talk about assaults, threatening, abusive communication directed towards staff, and well over half of these occur in our libraries, and I'm just wondering, given that in our customer surveys, libraries are the most beloved places with the highest customer satisfaction, and a lot of our librarians are women, how are we looking to mitigate those effects? How are we protecting our staff? What are we doing to train them to manage that?
So we've got quite a layered approach that we're taking. So we're starting off at a basic level around sort of basic education. So how to de-escalate conflict, how to behave in and around conflict, how to basically interact with somebody who's exhibiting signs of potentially being distressed and certainly angry. And we call that our de-escalation training. And everybody should go through that training as part and parcel of their front facing. So that's one of the first layers. The second layer, which we're starting to explore now, is around the design of our libraries. So are we able to design our libraries with that in mind, particularly on a risk assessment basis? Because I think I said to you as a governing body when I first came to council that we didn't want to sort of wrap our people behind perspex. That's not the look we want for council. But we are trying to apply better design techniques into our libraries. So, for example, we can remotely lock down our libraries at the touch of a button so we can exclude people away from the potential danger. Or we can have what we call safe havens built into the library, so we can have a room where people can retreat to and be there safe until the police has arrived. So all those sort of things are being explored at the moment. We also have various technological solutions as well. So all our libraries, or the majority of libraries, I wouldn't say all, but the majority of libraries are fitted with panic alarms, which patch through, more often than not, patch through to a live response, like a company who come in and do that. So there's a whole layering of controls that we take into effect.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ollie, I was under the impression that this was the report that was going to have some sort of follow-up to the findings of 2 or 3 years ago in respect of the mental well-being of our employees. I can't seem to find any reference to that in this report.
I'm going to have to apologise for that, Councillor. The data is ready. We just didn't get it ready in time for this reporting period. I'm more than happy to bring it to you on a one-on-one if you'd like to see it sort of before then, but it will definitely be before the committee.
Yeah, okay. So I would like to see that. This was, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, where there were some rather disturbing statistics in respect of well, basically the mental well-being of a significant number of our employees. So for me, that has been consistently my number one concern in this, in terms of the organisation as a whole. So it's disappointing that it's not here for this meeting today. I will take you up on your offer, however, to have a look, and I hope that can be brought to the attention of the new council as early as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. If there are no other questions, we'll now move to comments. Sorry, there is a question to my right. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you for that. I've taken quite a strong interest in this, and going back to the years that Mike Lee and I spent on the board of Auckland Transport, the abuse that occurred with infringement notices and those officers responsible was absolutely appalling. But I'm interested to know whether you feel, as a governing body, we are doing enough in terms of site visits to understand the workplace. To the best of my knowledge, we haven't had a lot of site visits out into the field to actually understand the situation for many of the council employees. Is there any advice that you could give us on what our obligations are in terms of site visits?
For sure, yeah, through the chair. There is a programme of site visits running. Absolutely, we're more than happy to organise site visits if that's what you wish. In terms of the advice I would give you, I think it is an important component under your due diligence duties that the Act places upon you to understand, not just through the information that we are presenting to you as a governing body on a regular basis, but to be curious beyond that and to go and see that for yourself. So if that's something that there's definitely an interest in, Councillor, we can certainly organise one, and we can probably take it to a collection collection of sites, be that active recreation centres, our libraries, so you can see some of the things that are happening in action. More than happy to organise that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. Just got a question, Ollie. Quite obviously, we're getting abusive behaviour from people in the community. I'm making the assumption in some instances that that is as a consequence of interaction with the council, possibly around issues. So, is there any record kept of what has triggered the incident or what has led up to it? And is it possible for us to have that information? And I don't need that information now, but like Councillor Watson, I would appreciate the opportunity to have that information later. I know, for example, that I have people communicating with me about issues with resource consents, building consents, transport issues, and sometimes the nerves of the people that I'm interacting with get relatively frayed. So maybe the abuse is a consequence of a process.
Again, through the chair, for sure. All this data is available to you through the Risk Manager app, so you can literally just go in and sort of run a report. If that's something the committee feel, the governing body feel that they would like to take up on, then we can demonstrate how you can run those reports yourself. Within the report at attachment A, there's a snapshot of some of the incidents, and you can see that we gather sort of what the event was, the status of it, and obviously actions that we need to remedy from that point on. So we do capture that information, and the security team work really, really closely with the health and safety team to ensure that we capture as much information there. And you can understand, because some of them are quite major. So, for example, if it's an assault or a threat or a major threat made to our staff, then we always seek to trespass those individuals from our buildings. And obviously we need to maintain that process. So it is all there. I'm quite happy to give you a report that sort of takes you through all the particular violence incidents, and we can do a trend analysis, because it is different how they arise. Sometimes it's a fight that spills into a library and our people get impacted. Other times it may just be through a council service where they're asking questions and getting frustrated at the response that we are providing. It happens for all sorts of various reasons.
Thank you. Councillor Josephine Bartley.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to acknowledge our staff out there, especially our library staff. I'm good for a site visit because I always hang out in our libraries and in our council facilities, our gyms, our halls. And what I notice, it is about how the staff deal with people, and it is about the relationships that they've created and the importance that they play in the community. So I really do want to acknowledge our library staff, because we do have a lot of, antisocial behaviour, but it's how the staff are dealing with it. And I really do take my hat off to them. We can provide security guards, some ban people, some trespass people, but at the end of the day, it really comes down to how the staff are dealing with people. So I really acknowledge them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Al Filipaina.
Thank you, Your Worship. Oliver, I remember asking, and this is along the same lines as Councillor Watson, but I remember asking how we can protect the staff that end up being abused from the public as a result of some elected members' postings, criticising the council, and as a result, our staff get the wrong end of the stick. So I don't know, I actually thought that was reported back to us. But look, if it hasn't, that is so important from my perspective, because I also remember the Regional Facilities Auckland, RFA, they ended up coming with a PowerPoint presentation to here, saying that their staff ended up struggling, working long hours as a result of also decisions and comments made from councillors around this table in regards to budget cuts and everything else. So, I mean, that would be easy to ask. So, has there been a report on that? If not, can it come to the new council around it?
No, we've never sort of tracked it from that sort of point of view. I mean, there is a process in council under the charter, which is the Speak Up channel. So if we feel that there's anything along that sort of side of it, which is more to do with the organisational sort of operation, then it can come up through that channel. We haven't seen anything come up through that channel, but it's probably a piece of work that we can sort of take away and have an explore around. Yeah, for sure.
Your Worship, that's a piece of work I mentioned last term and this term, because some of the staff that I've spoken to, and Oliver, I look forward to site visits, which some of us have already done, to the libraries, but also to the Pound in Manukau, for example. But, Your Worship, I think it'll be important that we end up starting to do this work, because the responsibility and accountability to pressure being applied to our staff as a result of elected members' comments, that should be made public as well. And I think it's just a means of just asking them, you know, in regards to how they're feeling. And if one comment could be, look, it's because of the postings that we've had from elected members. And I think that's important, not naming the elected member, but then just having the issue brought to our attention. Thank you.
Thank you. We've had a number of issues foreshadowed that will be coming back to the new council, and these reports are, of course, made regularly to us. But I think all of us would be concerned at the level of violence towards our staff being a top risk, and all of us would need to ensure that in what we say, we don't contribute to that risk. Are there any comments? We've kind of merged a little bit from questions to comments. Councillor Richard Hills.
And just a brief comment, just to thank Ollie and the team. I've seen a considerable, you were already doing a lot of work in this space, but I've seen it grow considerably this term. And thank you for meeting with me often on mental health and other issues around safety of staff. And I do get a number of comments from staff that they feel the support is increasing, but there are a lot of pressures, stress and overtime, and pressures from elected members being belittled and yelled at meetings or local board meetings, as well as the kind of behaviour of candidates and sometimes the public. So I think, and we have discussed it around a campaign, maybe next term, whoever's here, around the responsibility of others, how they should treat staff. You know, we shouldn't be having a rise in physical and verbal abuse of staff members and contractors, and it makes it difficult when most people working for the organisation are trying to do the best for the city. So just want to say thank you so much for stepping up, and all the, you know, from several departments who have given more training and support for staff, workshops, Mental Health Foundation, all the different things that have happened over the last 3 years. I hope it continues and we continue to put more work in that area, because if we don't have a good functioning team of people and they feel under pressure, then the whole city is under pressure. So just want to thank you and all the staff who work for the organisation.
Thank you, Councillor. I think all the councillors around the table would join Ollie in offering our thanks to you and your team for the work that you do. Councillor Chris Fletcher.
Well, thank you. I too want to share my congratulations to the staff that have been working on this. I haven't taken such a great interest in it over the last 3 years, but prior to that, I was particularly interested on the safety issues and how that flowed on to our responsibilities in terms of procurement. So if you take our parks portfolio, the risk of things by perhaps not having the right drive-on mower with the right equipment, where stones might fly out, and there's a whole range of very small but practical issues where there could be unintended consequences for which we all have a sense of obligation. And so it's actually having an understanding of the inherent risks that are there, not just the existing risks, but the possible risks for the future, and seeing that flow on into all of our policies, including procurement, to make sure that we have the right equipment, that we have made the right amount of safety provision, and that we are taking into account the needs of our staff, but also those of the wider community. I think you have made considerable progress in this sphere. I think that there is more work yet to be done, and that is why I, for one, would really welcome further site visits. I know when I spent time on the start-up of the Maunga Authority as the Deputy Chair, these were things that we took into account very seriously in terms of the operational requirements moving forward. And I would like to think that we can actually spend as much time as a governing body on these sorts of matters, because there are so many. When you actually start thinking of the amount of projects right across Auckland at the moment, the areas that are coned off, the parks that are being manicured, all of these things create natural hazards, and I think that we have an obligation to understand those and to manage them. So I want to thank you very much for the work you're doing and look forward to working with you going forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor John Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I would also like to acknowledge the work that Ollie and his team are doing to try and improve the health and safety outcomes for our staff. I think this time of year, as much as any, people, if they're out and about in the community, as a lot of us are at the moment, can see how difficult it is to deal with increasingly uncooperative and aggressive sections of our society, and our staff in a number of areas are at the front line of that and are doing that on a daily basis. So like teachers, like police, like people working in hospitals, they often get to see the rather unsavoury side of our society. However, I would not want to conflate that aspect of our staff with the issue that I was bringing up, was to do with the mental well-being of the staff in this organisation, because they are two quite distinct issues. And I think particularly of the dynamics of a super city where there is only one employer, there is not 8 potential places where people can go to get jobs, and that can have the effect of creating pressures and expectations that can increase mental anxiety. So I am looking forward to the follow-up to that survey that was done, that was disturbing, and that was not brought about by the criticisms that elected members may or may not have made on any given issue. That's the job of elected members, to criticise things when they go wrong, not to personalise it in any shape or form, but certainly to hold aspects of the organisation to account. So I do not want that red herring getting thrown out there, when my concern is with the people who work in this organisation, their mental well-being, that are quite distinct from the difficult job they often face when out in the community, which I take my hat off to them for doing that. It can be very unpleasant. So thank you, Ollie. I know that you're certainly doing your best to champion health and safety, but that is an ongoing concern, and hopefully we'll get those results to see how things are tracking in that very important manner of mental well-being. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mike Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question. Under the Local Government Act, this council, this governing body has one employee, and that's Mr. Town, the Chief Executive. However, under the health and safety legislation, the definition of employee, or rather worker, is way more broad, and that also includes all the staff who work for Mr. Town, but also outsourced staff. Would that be a correct interpretation of that, Oliver?
Broadly, yes. We have a responsibility for contractors that we bring in to do work on our operation. However, it's not as simple as saying we owe them a duty. We clearly do owe them a duty, but the primary duty of care is owed to them by their own employer. We have a responsibility to ensure that their employer has all the right information that we might hold enable them to work safely. But broadly, yes, health and safety is a consideration that we should all have for each other.
It makes for an interesting question because, for instance, rail staff work for Transdev. They're paid essentially by Auckland Transport and ultimately by us from rates, and therefore we do have a responsibility under the health and safety legislation for the well-being of those outsourced workers. And I think when it comes to inspections and so on, we need to also visit the actual coalface of our project, which when it comes to doing stuff out in the community, it's often outsourced people like bus drivers, rail staff and so on, we need to familiarise ourselves with their situation, because there are major health and safety risks for those sorts of people. And I don't think health and safety and our responsibility for it should be an opportunity for shallow political point scoring, by the way. Let's leave that for the election hustings and focus on the people who are really vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Penny-Holtz.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and humble apologies for being a little bit late to the meeting. I just really interested in the discussion about health and safety and protection of our staff, and I note with a huge amount of distress the bullying and the completely inappropriate use of videos of Ludo Campbell-Reid on the internet to promote people's election chances. I find this despicable, and I think it is entirely untenable that a staff member should be used in this way. So I'm just interested in people's expressions of well-being, concerns for the staff, and hope that, you know, everyone's going to look after each other, etc., while reposting what is a video designed to engender hatred, anger, misinformation and abuse of our staff. The more we do this, the less safe our staff feel. So it's all very well to talk to you, Ollie, about the good job you're doing, but unless we take responsibility for the same thing, it's going to be a fairly hollow approach for the future. So, Mr Mayor, I hope through the Chief Executive we do take some action against those posting this piece of hate speech, because I think it is entirely inappropriate. I don't think it's worthy of debate, but I raise it as one of the last concerns I'd like to see raised, and express my absolute support for our staff, and particularly for Ludo Campbell-Reid, who's doing the job we asked him to do. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor. I think it is inappropriate for staff to be attacked on the hustings when they're not in a position to defend themselves. And I note that that main attack has not come from a current member of the council. Councillor Rossclough. Councillor Filipina to finish.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I receive phone calls from staff who, as a result of Facebook or whatever other things they use, social media, who end up getting attacked by elected members, and it's not a red herring. I am concerned in regards to those members who tell me how they feel as a result. So, Oliver, I have sent you an email, and hopefully we can meet next week, because I have mentioned this several times over the last 5 years, because it is important that we find out from a psychological perspective of our staff member how and why it has affected them and who is responsible, not targeting the person that has either posted. So, you know, for me, that is so key in regards to at least talking to them and saying, you know, why are you feeling this way and everything else. And it's just so important, because this year is the worst year in the 16 years that I've been a councillor. This year has been the worst year in regards to comments against other candidates, and it's just shocking to see. But look, maybe that's just how you do things politically. Well, it's not how I do things. But, you know, it's really about the staff. So, you know, Oliver, I'm hoping that when you do receive that email that you can get hold of the boss man, who's Joseph Wood, for me, and to arrange a meeting next week, please. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Now, the next last call is Deputy Mayor Bill Cashmore.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just briefly, Ollie, well done. The trends here are good across the whole group, so we're heading in the right direction. If I could, Mr Mayor, the procurement piece was brought up, and as Chair of Strategic Procurement, just like to make sure everyone understands that we have actually a very key plank as health and safety and strategic procurement. It's probably our key plank, as is performance. And as is also having the right piece of kit in the right place at the right time. And that is enabled by having contracts set to the right length of time so that they are bankable. So that's work that's actually been done this term and has got some really good results, not only in savings but in higher performance. So thanks for monitoring that as well, Ollie. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please